This is Danny Gould with the Gould team selling Silicon Valley. Welcome to another Silicon Valley market snapshot. This for the final week now of May 2019. And as we wrap this month up of May here, I really, when I'm looking at some of these graphics and info charts, it's interesting because last year, we've been talking so much about how this year is so drastically different than last year. But that being said, if you look at the inventory levels, May was kind of the month last year where things started to get a little funky, right? Where inventory levels started to rise pretty drastically. And so as we look at the year-over-year numbers, what you'll notice is that this year, or the disparity and the discrepancy and the delta between last year and this year is starting to shrink in terms of inventory, right? Where in months prior we were used to seeing 1 to 2 to 3x, or 2 to 3x rather, the amount of inventory that there was at this time last year. Then now we're about like 50% or so, right? So 1.5x instead of 2 or 3x. And in a lot of areas actually, in a lot of areas we're actually up pendings year over year, which is a very encouraging sign. It means that some of the excess inventory is actually being absorbed. And so let's look at some of the maps, ladies and gentlemen. Here we have, not the map rather, but the data charts that show us the active and pendings for this week. So 1437 active and 1077 pending. Now, when we compare that to last year, we see that there were 953. But look at where we were, say, in 2017, 992, right? So by this time last year, we had already normalized to the year prior, if that makes sense. Whereas if you look at the beginning of April, 564 to 822. So the acceleration in 2017 was much slower than it was in the springtime of last year. And this year, the acceleration mimics more of what we saw in 2017. Now, if you look 1437 compared to 1252 at this time in 2016, that's not far off, right? I mean, it's really not that far off. Now, in terms of pendings, we definitely see that we're lower than we've been at any point over the last 3 years. That being said, it's spotty because there are some areas where the inventory or the pendings are actually greater year over year, and some where they've dropped. And we can go over that in the next slide. And we've talked about why that could be in previous videos. But if you notice, the single-family market's only half the battle, right? Or only tells half the story. The other half is in the condo townhome sector. And if we take a look at this, I mean, we are over double where we were at this point last year, right? And 2.5x where we were in 2017. And now that being said, some encouraging news is that additional inventory, some of it at least, is being absorbed when you compare it to last year. 417 absorbed versus 457. Now, we have yet to reach 2017 and 2016 levels. Will we get to that point where we're absorbing more of the condo and townhome sector? That will only happen if more people come down in their price here in the condo townhome sector. We're starting to reach an equilibrium point, right? And if anything's going to give, it's going to force prices to start coming down. People are going to have to start reducing their prices and or selling for right at market value, right? Long gone are the days where you're going to be selling for the high, for the record-setting price in your neighborhood if you're a condo or a townhome owner in Silicon Valley. And that's going to continue to be the case until inventory levels come down to where they were before, or even lower, to be honest, because there's excess single-family inventory, which in turn puts even more pressure on the single-family market, because on the condo and townhome market, because single-family homes have always been and will continue to be more preferable to the condo townhome to condos and townhomes in general. Right now, there's always exceptions to the rule, but that is generally the rule, right? Now, look at this active listing map here for the central part of Santa Clara County. You'll notice that everything that I just talked about holds true, right? If you look in a lot of these markets, in most of these markets, you'll see that inventory levels are in the double digits year over year, as opposed to being in the triple digits. Where if you look back, if you've been watching my videos for any period of time, last 3-4 months, especially in February and March, we were seeing triple digits almost all across the board. Now we're seeing it just in these kind of central parts of San Jose, and a lot of that is due in part to the fact that, especially in this area right here, we talked about this area last week, where we saw a really high demand in this area. Well, the whole Google effect is hitting this area hard, and so this is kind of an anomaly. And there are more people that are cashing in this area because they're seeing what's going on, and they're seeing the revitalization, and they're hopping on that bandwagon. They're like, well, I got to sell now. They see what else is going on around here, and they're like, well, what eventually happens here is going to trickle in here. It might take longer. So anyone that's selling right now in this area is pretty smart, if you ask me. And because they're cashing in, and they're eventually going to get hit by what's going on in the rest of the market, but it's going to take longer. So now let's talk about this area right here, the northern part of Santa Clara County. This is active listings year over year. And if you notice, these are areas that are A areas, right? Anyone would consider these A to A plus areas in the Silicon Valley. And there's more inventory than there was at this point last year. And what I also wanted to point out, where'd it go? Are the pending listings rather. And that is Palo Alto, negative 45, and Los Altos, negative 11. Now, pendings are up in Los Altos Hills, which is good, right? Because remember last week, if you saw what was going on last week, Los Altos Hills, it did not look pretty for that sector of the market. And Mountain View is up year over year. But I think if you remember what I spoke about last week, and that is what happens here will eventually trickle down to the rest of the market, right? And so now we see pending listings here in Santa Clara County. And we talked about, some of these A areas, or some of these areas where the schools are good, right? And that being a driving factor as to why the pendings were up in those areas where they were down in a lot of other areas, right? Well, now you can see some of this start to shift, right? And the reason that this is shifting now, right? Now Cupertino's up. Well, Cupertino's still up, but now Evergreen's down, right? And some of the other markets that now Saratoga's up when it was down last week, right? So what's happening is you get this yin and yang effect, right? Okay, well, why do people shop in Evergreen? Well, it's great school district, right? Great school districts, and especially elementary and middle school, right? And then, if you live on this side, then you get to go to Evergreen High School. Well, okay, that's great and all, but for the same price, I can now go to like Cambrian, right? Which is up. Okay, but now, right, when Cambrian is up, right? So people have left Evergreen, they're going to Cambrian, they're going back to Cupertino, right? And then in a few weeks, we're going to see these numbers drop and these numbers and this go up, right? Because it's a constant battle between it's like herd mentality, right? Like they flock to one area, the area gets saturated, and then they flock to the next area, right? And so when you see markets in different, when you see different sectors of the market behave this way, it's because they're around, like the houses are around the same prices, right? Now you get more bang for your buck here than you do over here, right? But really the driving force behind a lot of that comes down to schools, right? And so for the same price, I can get about the same caliber or quality school. And so when this section or these sections of the market become saturated, we see an effect where a lot of them flee or flock to this area until this section of the market or sector of the market gets saturated, and they say, oh, well, now pendings are down. Now there's homes that are still available that have been sitting on the market for 3-4 weeks in this area. Let me come back to this area. And so obviously, guys, this is a gross generalization, right? We're talking generalities here, But it's very interesting to see that the data corroborates common sense, right? Like, isn't it funny how like, if it just like, it makes sense, right? And then the data like corroborates that. Don't overthink it. I think people often tend to overthink the situation, right? And the situation is very evident, right? We're approaching, if not already neutralized, right? We've stabilized. In a lot of areas, it still definitely is seller's market, right? But things are just going to take longer to sell. So what are my parting thoughts here as we wrap this video up? Parting thoughts are, we're now approaching summertime. And as we approach summertime, be cognizant of the many impending holidays that are coming up, right? And not just holidays, but it's now the season of change, right? We have graduations, we have weddings, and then after that, everyone decides to go out of town for 4th of July. June, to me, has never really been the best month to initiate or launch your home into the market. And so I think as the data shows, right, we're at a point right now where you need all the help you can get, and positioning yourself in a time where many of the buyers in the marketplace are going to be out of town or preoccupied, or their minds are going to be somewhere else. Not the smartest move to be putting your home on the market in June. So that's initial thought number one. If you're a seller, if you're a buyer, stay home. Don't go to the graduations, don't go to the weddings, or, go do that and then make a lot of time during the weekdays, because there are going to be opportunities for you out there right now, because a lot of the other buyers are not going to be around. They're going to be too preoccupied. So use this data, use this knowledge to your advantage. Go out there and find your house, because there are going to be deals to be had over the next 4 to 8 weeks. So those are really my parting thoughts, and that's my parting message to all of you. As you see this data, again, guys, it's very easy to start overthinking all of this, but what I just told you, like I literally just broke it down for you in very plain English. Go do. See you guys in the next video.